Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I'm reviewing Apollo Song by Osamu Tezuka. Now, before I start talking about my opinions of this series, let me just kind of give you a bit of a background. So, this series was written by Osamu Tezuka around 1970, and about that time there was a relaxing of sexual education laws for children in Japan, and Osamu Tezuka wanted to deal with, he wanted to create a manga that dealt with those themes. And I wouldn't go so far as to say that this is a sexual education manga, but it is a manga dealing with sexual topics and love, etc, etc. Which brings us to the story. So, we are introduced to our lead character, Shogo, and Shogo is mentally ill. He's been booked into a mental hospital, and the problem is that he cannot deal with love. Whenever he sees animals in the act of love, he kills them. And this stems from his mother, who was very promiscuous. She slept with a lot of men. He doesn't know who his father is. She claimed, so-and-so man is his father, but, he never found out. And sometimes he might actually walk in accidentally on her as she's in an act of love with another man, at which point she would beat him. And this created an intense dislike in him for love and for that act of love. Now, cut to the mental hospital. He undergoes electroshock therapy, and during this electroshock therapy he kind of goes into a state. He enters this other world, where he meets the Greek goddess of love, Athena. And Athena says to him that he does not know love, and in order to find out about love, he will experience love throughout the ages, that he will go to a time period, he will fall in love with a woman, but before their love can come to fruition, one of them will die, and they will suffer, and that will happen for eternity. And that's kind of where the manga goes then. There's about 6 chapters in this manga, and of those 6 chapters, half of them are those episodic stories, and the other half is dealing with Shogo in real life, as he's dealing with, as he's kind of developing that ability to love and recovering from his mental illness. And just before I deal with his real life recovery, I'm just going to give a kind of a quick review of each of the stories. So, basically the first story that we come across is a story called Die Blumen und der Leich, which I believe means the flower and the corpse. And as you can guess, it's set during Nazi Germany. And it's a kind of a by-the-book standard, love story. It's actually not that well developed, in my opinion. So I did have problems with that, and I wasn't that engaged with it. However, the next story, No Man's Land, was actually very good. Basically, it dealt with the two people getting trapped on an island and coming across these weird animals, etc, etc. And it's actually a very nicely well done story, which I could actually believe that that love could develop between these two characters, at least to the point where there's sexual tension. So, I was quite pleased with that story. And then what I would argue would be the best story of all that is this chapter here called Queen Sigma, which is actually set in the future. And it deals very much with the idea of a robot trying to fall in love. But it's actually very well told, and I enjoyed it a lot. So, of those 3 stories, one of them's kind of I wasn't that keen on it. The other one was very good, and then the other one was brilliant. So, episodically, it's very good. Now, for the actual main story of Shogo recovering from this illness, he deals with a lot of characters. He deals with the doctor, who is trying to help him recover, but isn't entirely sure how to help him, because this isn't like a normal mental illness. This is, it's more like a phobia. So the doctor is a bit unsure of how to help him. He tries out various methods, Eventually Shogo encounters this woman who he begins to develop feelings for, and she's a bit unorthodox, but that kind of appeals to him, and he steadily begins to learn about what love is, and what love can be, and what emotions it evokes. So the development of Shogo as a character is actually very nice. So I was quite pleased with that. I was also quite satisfied by the story's ending. It was a bit sad, and I was hoping for a more positive conclusion, but overall I was quite satisfied with the ending. There was a good few twists throughout the story, enough to always keep me engaged, and overall I liked the story overall, and I liked the episodic elements to the story in general. So overall I thought it was a very well told story. Now, this is a shonen manga, and as a shonen manga it doesn't quite have that realism that a lot of Osamu Tezuka's seinen works possess. However, by this point he had done a couple of seinen works, and you can start to see the more realistic elements creeping in to his art style, which I personally prefer. And you also have some very lovely panel use. A good example might be this page. Some very lovely use of diagonals in order to create action. There's also a lot more detail than was present in his earlier shonen works. There's also a lot of detail in the background, for instance on this page, which again is kind of developing from his seinen style. So overall, it's a very artistically pleasing manga, I find, particularly from Osamu Tezuka, as we can see the development of his art style from his very cartoony past to his steadily becoming more realistic future. The early 1970s was a kind of a turning point artistically for him, so I'm always very pleased to see this development in him, as I personally prefer the art of his later years. Not to say that his previous work is bad, just that I personally prefer his later art style. Now, to discuss Vertical's treatment of this series, I was pleased with the translation. It flowed well, it was very good overall, but I do have some points to make about this series. For one, which I cannot completely understand, in general with Vertical, in most cases, shonen manga is kind of left unflopped, and while the seinen Osamu Tezuka gets flopped, as it was generally read mostly by graphic novel readers of the West rather than manga fans. However, this series, which is a shonen, is flopped, which is a bit irritating. Now, I didn't really notice any points in it where, I was kind of, not like Message to Adolf, where, the Nazis were, making the salute with the wrong arm. There was none of those kind of moments where I suddenly went, oh, this is wrong. But in general, I would like it to be unflopped. Two other issues I have with this release from Vertical is that the trim size is smaller than their other releases of Osamu Tezuka in general. If I might compare it, for instance, to a volume of Blackjack, Blackjack also being a shonen, this is the size. So I don't understand why they chose to make this series smaller. I would prefer the larger trim size of other Osamu Tezuka works. So I was also kind of disappointed at that. And finally, my biggest issue with this is, okay, this book looks quite thin, doesn't it? But, can you believe, there's over 280 pages packed into this. So, my issue with this release is that the pages are quite thin. Now, they're not wafer thin, they're not kind of, Viz Media 3-in-1, but there was points where there was page bleeding, where I could see what had happened on the previous page kind of coming through the page that I was currently reading, which is always irritating when that comes. So I would have preferred if Vertical had used thicker pages for this release. I know that this is the second release of Apollo Song that they did, that the original release of Apollo Song was actually in this one book, so I don't know if there was a change in trim size or page width between that book and this one. these ones. But I was a bit disappointed. So I think Vertical could have done a lot better with the presentation of these books. But overall, what did I think of Apollo Song? I enjoyed it. It was an engaging series. It made me think about a lot of themes, you know, the theme of love, the theme of lost love and dealing with love, etc, etc. I also found the story itself engaging with twists, turns, and also some very nice episodic content to do with love and potential love. There was one story in there that I wasn't that keen on, but overall I would think that the story itself is very good. And the art, you know, I like. It's the kind of the metamorphosis from old Tezuka to new Tezuka, which I always enjoy seeing. It's a very visually appealing series. Also with his characteristic, you know, great paneling, which I always think is a bit short in manga these days. Vertical could have done a lot better with this release, in my opinion, but what can you do? At least they released it, right? So I highly recommend that you get this, particularly if you're an Osamu Tezuka fan. If you're not into Osamu Tezuka, I would recommend that you get maybe, you know, Message to Adolf instead, or Blackjack. Something that's a bit easier to get into, and then you go get this series once you've kind of developed a taste for Osamu Tezuka, a kind of understanding of his style. But overall, this is a very easily recommendable series, and I would recommend that you get it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.